Hey everyone, happy Monday. So I sound a little bit rough, and Tara asked me, like, oh, are you getting sick again? Which I probably am because my very best friend since 4 years old is in town and we just got drunk all weekend. So yeah, I probably am getting sick. But what we like to do is we get drunk and then we sit around and just get like super goofy. And she's like, hey, you want to mess with my liberal brother? I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So we started texting back and forth because her brother is very anti-Trump. And so he brought up a story we're actually going to talk about today with the Democrat lawmakers. And we were obviously drinking and just kind of like, I'm like, tell him this, like that'll piss him off. And we're like dying laughing, not taking any of it seriously. Well, he took it very seriously. And then she's like, oh shit, I hope he picks me up from the airport still. So she's gonna bring him a nice t-shirt to say sorry and please pick me up from the airport.
Will it be a Trump t-shirt?
That would be
Wouldn't that
awesome.
be best?
But then he probably, yeah, that would be the end of it. So we'll find something a little more, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we can find. Something
Well,
more
it sounds like,
neutral.
yeah, but it sounds like you had an awesome weekend. And I love that she's actually on the same page with you in terms of
Yes.
politics.
And they threw a surprise 40th birthday for me, which I was not, I really wasn't expecting because my birthday was, like a couple weeks ago. And so we were at the beach and we got home and there were people in my house and I was so confused. But I was like, oh, that's why you decided to come this weekend.
I didn't realize you turned 40.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a milestone.
I know. Everyone's like, how does it feel? How does it feel? I'm like, honestly, I think turning 30 was harder for me than turning 40 because I'm just like, whatever, I'm for like no big deal. Doesn't
Yeah.
bother me or I don't know.
That's funny. I think my 30th birthday was like a big deal too.
Yeah,
And I don't
because it
even
was like, oh
remember
man,
my
my
40s.
20s are over and like everyone says that's the best time of your life, but I feel like better now than I did when I was 20. So I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
doing fine. I feel young. I feel great. It's fine.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember we talked. Your birthday was on which holiday? I always forget.
D-Day, June 6th.
D-Day. I keep thinking it
Hmm.
was Flag Day, but that was this weekend. D-Day. Yeah. So everyone happy belated to Stephanie.
Yeah. How
So
was your weekend?
my weekend was actually totally surreal because I have to compare my weekend to everything that's been going on with the No King's Day protests and the riots and I just keep seeing all this footage of Los Angeles that continues to be an apocalyptic war zone of violence. I think they're now on their fifth day of a declared state of emergency with the ridiculous, ineffective nightly curfew that's in place. And you have all these local businesses that remain shuttered, financially devastated. And then you have Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass doing really nothing to quell the violence and destruction. And you have the same shit going on in Portland and Seattle and all over the country. And then at the same time, you had Trump's military parade celebrating the 250th anniversary or birthday of the US Army, and then also his 79th birthday. And I don't know what you saw, Stephanie, but everything I saw about it was like, it was a pretty chill event. It seemed more like a 4th of July picnic. But it wasn't
Yeah.
getting any media attention because our media doesn't like to call attention to anything that's positive going on in America or anything that celebrates American culture or our military or our veterans. And everything I did see was trying to compare Trump's event with communism and saying this was something that North Korea or Stalin would have done with a military parade. And I guess the event remained fairly peaceful, but you still had hundreds or maybe it was even thousands of people that showed up to protest. And meanwhile, in the Czech Republic, I was celebrating both law enforcement and America in a foreign country, protest and riot free.
Oh, nice. Like they had an event going on?
Oh yeah, there was a couple things. So I want to start day. And I didn't even know any of this was going on, but we went to the city center in the area where I live, and it's like one of those historic old European squares, just a super cool
I
place.
wish we had
And
that here. We don't have
I do
anything
too.
cool like that. It's
I
so
know. I'm
beautiful.
really gonna miss that. But they were having like a pro police show, and they had static displays of vehicles and equipment and they were playing music. But it wasn't just the Czech police. They had officers and equipment there from Slovakia and Italy and Slovenia and I think a couple other countries. And it was just this really cool vibe. Groups of school kids. I think they were there like on a school field trips for the day, and families were there, and everyone was having fun. And I'm watching like teenage girls climb up on the ladder of the SWAT vehicle and taking selfies, and people are posing for pictures with the cops. And it was like pro police, totally chill, no drama, not a single protester. No chaos, no barricades. Everything was like out in the open for everyone to enjoy. And it was just this really fun, supportive environment. And we had just gone to get coffee and like stumbled upon it. And then later in the evening, we came back to the same area for dinner. And there was another pro police event going on because this weekend was apparently the 26th annual International Police Horsemanship Championships of the Czech Republic.
Hmm.
And I didn't even know they did that, but they had the opening ceremonies on Friday evening and they had mounted units there from all over Europe. And it reminded me of like when I went to DC when I worked the mounted unit and we were that was actually for Police Memorial Week. And you just had these units from all over Europe. There was a huge traditional brass band playing. It was the police band, and there was a crowd gathering. And it was, again, totally peaceful, supportive, fun, no issues, no drama, in complete contrast to what I've been seeing in the media with what's happening in the States and the videos of assholes trying to assault police horses and officers getting injured. And then get this on Saturday, I went to the 16th annual Lucky Cruisers weekend. And this is a 3-day festival that's the largest US classic car show in the Czech Republic. And it is just a total celebration of American culture, like Route 66 style. And I was only there for a few hours on Saturday because it was blazing hot this weekend and we had the dog with us. But there were hundreds of classic American made cars. Everywhere you looked, it was American flags. There were Trump flags. It was classic
That
American food,
surprises
like,
me because aren't a lot of
oh,
people
yeah,
anti-Trump there? Or
yes, yes, they are.
supposedly? Yeah.
Yeah. It
Huh.
was crazy, but it was like they had mac and cheese and hamburgers and this classic American retro music. They had a pinup girl contest, and it even had categories for little girls. It was so cute. And there was art and live bands playing American rock music. They had a whole drive-in theater screen set up. And then it was like at this big lake, which is, I guess, a pretty big vacation spot here or like recreational spot. And they had a cruising area where the cars could just like drive around all day and like gas their engines. They had all like gas guzzling anti-EU law modifications to their cars, and everyone's revving their engines. And you have these like beautiful classic American muscle cars, diesel trucks and tractors, like the classic Fords from the 20s and 30s. All of them flying American flags, kids piled in the cabs of these trucks. They had like one truck that had a flatbed and it was towing like couches. And you just had kids and families sitting on the couches, listening to music, waving their flags. And my favorite car was a bright yellow Corvette that had a giant "fuck you, Greta" sticker that covered
Oh,
almost,
nice.
it was so cool. And it was like almost the entire windshield was covered. There were old cop cars there. There was like a car from the California Highway Patrol, and the guy was dressed in like full CHP uniform. There was another guy in NYPD uniform. There was a tire throwing contest, hamburger eating, an American chili contest. And what was really interesting is you could camp on site for the 3 days, but you could only bring a vehicle if it was an American made car or camper or RV. And if you had a non-American car, which is most of what's in Europe, you had to park outside the venue in a different lot. And they had like literal restrictions on what qualified as an American car because I translated all the rules in English and read them. And it had to be American companies like Ford or GM, Chevy, Chrysler. And
Nice.
it couldn't be a Hyundai or Toyota that was made in America. It had to be American companies. And you had guys like dressed in American muscle shirts and or like shirtless guys walking around in board shorts and flip-flops. One guy had American flag shower shoes. All the kids were dressed up. I saw like a bunch of cowboys. There were a few people dressed up like Indians, which I didn't fully understand, but it was just this super fun celebration of traditional American culture. And it wasn't happening in America. And it was so surreal to me thinking about the contrast of the shit show chaos that was going on in the United States with these angry mobs of just miserable, unhappy people living in the US who hate the US and anything that represents patriotism or law and order. And meanwhile, I'm having a great time celebrating American traditions in a foreign country.
I was not expecting that because everything you've told me from the Czech Republic is like they really are anti-Trump and like they think he's dangerous and everything else. But
The
I mean,
government is, but
yeah.
and the older people are. Like my seniors, they definitely are because they equate him to be a Putin supporter and, they have their history with Russia. So anything that's Russia related, they're against. But I have met a lot of younger people, not like teenage younger, but in their 30s, 20s to 40s that have been Trump supporters here, which really surprised me. And most of it is in conversation I've gotten into with like my Bolt drivers, which is like one of the Uber system type things here. And once they find out you're from America, then they start questioning you immediately about politics. And I've been very surprised by some of the conversations I've had that have been pro-Trump. And then I was talking to this one old guy at this festival, and once he found out we were American, because everyone there was Czech for the most part, and
Mhm.
once he found out we were American, he was so excited and was immediately saying like, "Oh, I hope your country's in better hands now, and you have so much to clean up from the last 4 years." And just it was really cool to see that kind of support that I don't I mean, again, the media is so censored here with what you see in the EU, but some people do know the truth. And it was just such a mind fuck in a positive way. But
Yeah.
then to realize, like, and then I'm going back to the shit show of people who hate living in America while this country is like, woo woo, we're celebrating America. Here is like America in the 80s. I think I've said that before.
Hmm.
It's like I feel like I'm living in America of the 80s
Yeah.
and down to the music they play, the culture. It's just they experienced communism for so long that they're clearly like steps behind from other areas of Europe. But the culture here is really amazing in some aspects, and it was just a cool event.
See, I feel like here the veil is lifting because I think this whole narrative that the media and celebrities are still trying to portray that like everyone hates Trump and isn't patriotic and all this stuff, it's all fake. Like all these protesters are paid for. And I think there's like a couple of things I've been seeing that really make me think like, okay, we're good despite what they're trying to say. And the first thing, and I don't know if you and I have talked about this yet, but is Target, like I do go to Target a lot. And remember, it was either last year or the year before, but like every June for Pride Month, they have like a whole display. And the last one was super controversial because they had all of these like outfits for trans children. And so
Right.
people were outraged and like boycotting them. Well, this year they replaced their Pride collection with an American, like patriotic collection of like clothes with American flags on them. And I was like, damn, for Target to do that. And they got so much positive publicity for it. I'm like, that's a good sign that people are like want to feel patriotic again. Like you were saying, when we were in the 80s, like I think of that and I think of like Bruce Springsteen music, which is so crazy
Yeah,
because he's like got Trump derangement syndrome. But like you
I
just
know.
think about like I remember going to Fourth of July parades and festivals and waving the American flag. And it's like I feel like Trump represents that. So there's that little bit of like nostalgia that he's trying to bring back. And I think despite all the protesters, most people are seeing through it now and realizing. So there was that. And then on social media, on TikTok, there's some influencers who decided all at once, okay, all at once, like the same day, they basically read a script about how these ICE raids are inhumane and we need to speak up and say something. So clearly they're getting paid by whoever and they're given a script to say something. Well, their followers are plummeting. I mean, plummeting. Like there's counters now showing how fast they're losing followers. And this is on like TikTok, where it used to be a lot of left-leaning people, and it's just not that way anymore. So I think things are changing, but like the media is trying to portray like, hey, this is 2020 and everybody hates Trump and there's riots everywhere. And, so I don't know. I just feel like the whole thing's a big theater performance. But I guess at the end of the day, my gut tells me we're headed in a good direction. And I have hope that it'll be like that in the Czech Republic, where we are all going to be living in this patriotic America again, hopefully without protesters in the near
I
future.
hope I hope so too. And I do love that Trump is like doubling down and he's not backing down
Hmm.
with the ICE enforcement. And I don't have my app open to read what he posted, but he put something up last night or yesterday that basically just said, no, we're going to keep doing this enforcement and we're going to make America safe and we are going to continue to deport all, the criminals and the illegals that are changing American culture.
Yeah, and it's a winning issue for him. And I'm even seeing people that live in LA posting. They're like, this is bullshit. We don't want to I look out my window, there's burning cars. I don't want to deal with
Mhm.
this anymore. Like it's all over TikTok. And you didn't see that in 2020, but you're seeing it now. Like people are just sick of this shit. But speaking of like the whole No Kings protest that we talked about before, there was actually a congressional hearing last week where that was a big topic. They had the governors from these sanctuary states testifying before Congress. So I have a couple of clips I want to play. The first is one of my favorite reps, Anna Paulina Luna, and she points out the No Kings protest has all these ties and funding that comes from the CCP. So I'm just gonna play what she said.
An internal memo that was released that stated that the government of China considered you a prime target for influence operations. I'm letting you know that now because I do believe that you should be made aware of, if you are not already, that you are working with and going to be speaking at an organization and rally that not is just funded by Christy Walton, the heiress of Walmart, but also has ties to the Chinese Progressive Association, largely funding it, that actually brags on their website that they are pro-Maoist. Also, too, funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. I know there's a lot of people on this committee that don't like billionaires interfering in politics, but say nothing when George Soros gets over $260 million from USAID through the last administration that's then funneled into some of these nonprofits and organizations. So I guess my question for you guys is, now that I've made you aware that these riots are not about illegals and they're not about immigrants, if they did, they would have been protesting under Barack Obama, who's also dubbed the deporter in chief. And frankly, I think many of you would say that Barack Obama was a good president. Are you going to say that Barack Obama wasn't a good president? Yes or no, Governor Waltz? Do you think he was a good president?
Do I think Barack Obama was a good president? I think he did a good job.
Okay, how about you, Governor Pritzker?
I think he did a good job.
Hochul?
Hochul, and yes, he did do a good job.
Okay, next, Perryman?
I think President Obama did a good job.
So then you would understand that Barack Obama had the very same policies for the most part on immigration that Republicans are parroting today. And yet you guys are sitting here saying that we're Gestapo. And what I would tell you is that what happens with open borders is that the real people that are coming here, the ones that are exploited, actually it hurts people on both sides, not just Americans, but the illegals. Some of you had said here to the actual committee that you are doing what you can to assist these people. But what I would say is that your policies aren't actually done from a place of understanding and sympathy. I would say that it's actually doing the exact opposite. And when you use brown people, just like they use black people with BLM and Marxists during BLM to usher that in, when you use brown people and you put Mexican flags with them saying that you stand up for illegal immigrants, but you follow the money and it's going back to the Communist Party, what you're essentially doing is using your platform as elected officials, the trust that the American people have put in you, essentially to usher in communism. You're not actually fighting for American values. Don't roll your eyes because it's a serious topic and that's where the money is coming from. So now I'm informing you. So now you guys can make your decisions, but please be informed informed, sir, Mr. Walls, that if you truly do uphold the American ideologies and perspectives on the Constitution, you should not be speaking at that rally. I've given you the correct information, and as of right now, I've authorized a letter to be sent to my office to the President of the United States to rescind millions of dollars in funding that we know are going to the No Kings protests that were authorized and basically given under the last administration. That is what Congress is supposed to do, not point fingers, not blame people, but actually ensure that the American people are protected and not fighting for foreign interests, foreign governments, and also the communist China.
Well, the gentlelady.
I love her. Don't roll your
Oh
eyes
my
at
God.
me.
I love that she didn't know whether it was Hochul or Hochul because I always say I don't know how the hell to say her name.
Yep. I
But
know.
she
I
did
thought of
say
you. I was
Hochul.
like, huh? She's like calling her out. Yeah, it was awesome. And then she was talking with reporters afterwards, and she was saying how she's working to subpoena this Chinese billionaire that's like funding these protests. And she's like, this isn't the last administration where we're going to send a strongly worded letter. Like, there's going to be criminal consequences if you don't show up to these hearings. And like, I feel like she means business. She's one of the few, probably because she's newer, that doesn't want to put up with this bullshit. But she makes a great point of bringing up Obama's deportations because it's like, up until Biden, this has happened over and over
Mhm.
again with Democrats too. Like Bill Clinton deported almost 2 million illegal immigrants. He signed in 1996 the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, which drastically increased deportations, and they were expedited removals. There wasn't due process like they keep crying about now. And then Bush deported 2 million, but Obama has the highest number of deportations in history. Yet they want to like bitch and complain about Trump. And it's like she's saying, if this was really about illegal immigrants, like you'd be complaining about Obama as well. So it's
Mhm.
like the 44 people that, ICE deported in LA is nothing compared to what the Democratic presidents did before. Biden was literally the only president that came in and did not enforce border security. So in the same hearing, House Rep Elise Stefanik, who's also awesome, just completely destroys Governor Kathy Hochul over her sanctuary state policies. So this is a longer clip, but it is well worth the listen. So here we go.
First day in office, you signed Executive Order 1. Is that correct?
I believe it is.
And you extended this executive order not once, not twice, but 3 times, most recently January 16th this year. Is that correct?
If that's what your facts show, I signed countless executive orders.
I would assume no, it's Executive Order 1. And this is a continuation of your predecessor's sanctuary state policies, correct? Is included in that.
I want to be sure we are defining sanctuary state
I'll
properly.
define it for you. It is the policy of the state that state officers or employees shall not disclose information to federal immigration authorities for the purpose of federal civil immigration enforcement. It goes on to say law enforcement officers may not use resources, equipment, or personnel for the purpose of detecting and apprehending any individual suspected or wanted for violating a civil immigration office. Law enforcement officers have no authority in the state of New York to take any policy action solely because the person is an undocumented alien. That's a quote in your executive orders that you extended. Now, do you know who Sakir Akan is?
I want to get back to the first.
No, I'm asking you a question. Do you know who Sakir Akan is?
I want to make sure you understand that this simply says that we will cooperate with ICE.
No, it does not say that. I read what it says, and let me talk to you about the results. Do you know who Sakir Akan is? You should, as the governor of New York State. Do you know?
Refresh my recollection.
He was an illegal migrant in New York. And do you know what crime he committed in addition to being here illegally?
No, I do not.
You do not. This was widely reported. He found a 15-year-old girl, threatened her with a metal pole, told her to get into the back seat of his car. He took her clothes off and he violently raped her in Albany, New York. Do you know who Sebastian Zapita Khalil is?
I'm sure you'll tell me there's many cases, whether they're
These are profile cases. New Yorkers know about them and you don't. So let's talk about Sebastian Zapita Khalil. Do you know who that is?
I don't have the specific details at my disposal, no.
Well, this is an illegal migrant in New York because of your sanctuary state policies. Do you know what crime he committed?
I'm not familiar at this moment.
I bet you're going to be familiar when I remind you. He found a sleeping woman on the subway, lit her on fire, and burned her alive. This is in Kathy Hochul's New York. And as I'm sure you are aware, and I'll remind you, that ICE issued an order to detain this violent criminal, but that was rejected by New York officials due to sanctuary state laws. Now, do you know who Raymond Rojas Basilio is?
I just want to say this. These crimes are horrific. I condemn them.
Because of your sanctuary state policies.
In all of these cases, we would work with ICE to remove them.
In this case, they need our assistance because of your policies and your executive order that you signed 3 times. Now, Raymond Rojas Basilio, do you know who that is?
I'm telling you this. I will explain to you the policies of New York. We cooperate with, I know you're just
specifically, ICE was told not to detain this individual, and he burned a woman alive on the New York subways in Kathy Hochul's New York. So I will keep on going. What about Raymond Rojas Basilio? Do you know who that is?
I'm going to tell you our overall policy, which will address all this.
I'll tell you who that is. He is an illegal who molested an 11-year-old in our state because, again, of your sanctuary state policies. This illegal was shielded from federal immigration enforcement and able to commit this heinous crime. And what about Wilson Castillo Diaz? Do you know who that is?
I'm telling you this. We do cooperate fully with ICE in criminal prosecution. Our sanctuary.
You're not advocating for these victims.
Only deal with civil.
5-year-old who was raped.
Civil enforcement.
In Nassau County. You are not advocating on behalf of these victims. You are shielding illegals. Even in your opening statement,
that is not
prioritize putting illegals first.
That is not
rapes
true.
Of young girls, beatings of NYPD cops by illegals who are here under Kathy Hochul's failed policies, burning New Yorkers alive. This is Kathy Hochul's New York. It's one of the many reasons why you're hemorrhaging support from hardworking New York.
These are horrific crimes, and they're heartbreaking.
They're horrific crimes that are committed on your watch. You signed this executive order on your first day in office. You signed it again and again this January. We deserve a governor who stands up for law-abiding New Yorkers, doesn't put illegals first, but actually puts New Yorkers first. I appreciate
rather than going after the viral moment, I suggest you look at the facts.
Standing up for New Yorkers.
No.
Rather than addressing the illegals in New York, you are prioritizing your far-left sanctuary state policies, which you put in place with executive orders. Instead of advocating,
we cooperate in all those cases. We cooperate with ICE.
Did not. They were released because of sanctuary state policies in New York State. No amount of words.
So she just was not letting her get away with it, and I love it.
No, and she shouldn't. And we have talked about New York and their sanctuary city policies for the past 3 years. And they have, up to this point, I think, spent almost $8 billion on services for illegal migrants, while you have, American citizens, people, New York residents, veterans, low-income families that aren't getting anywhere near the amount of funding that illegal migrants are. And I think they're still being put up in fancy hotels across New York City and receiving free medical care and food and their little credit cards, and the schools are overcrowded. Like, it's such a shit show. And she literally took no accountability for anything in that whole conversation.
No, and what's so maddening is that these people were detained. Like, ICE was trying to get to them, and New York knowingly let them go. They did not cooperate with ICE. So she could sit there and say, oh, yeah, we'll cooperate. It's too late. They've already hurt these people. You should have cooperated back when you had them in custody and ICE wanted to get them.
Yeah, and again, it has nothing to do with helping illegal migrants. It's a fucking media narrative. And I am so sick of this narrative that's being played out. The American people are sick of it. It's political theater from the left. And it is like, how does anyone not see that the whole purpose of this is to create a further divide in our country? Like, that is what this whole issue is about. And it's always the same far left, crazy blue cities. I mean, if you look at all the unrest that's taking place over ICE right now. Where is it happening? Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Austin, Minneapolis, Seattle. I'm honestly surprised that Seattle has been legitimately like mostly peaceful protests this time around. Contrast that to LA and Portland. I guess Portland police declared a riot yesterday because they had tens of thousands of people show up to protest outside an ICE facility. And as usual, it wasn't protesting, it was acts of violence. They actually like threw fireworks and rocks and smoke grenades at the building and forcibly entered the building, injured four officers, just total fucking chaos. And I want to see if anyone gets charged for crimes because they have made arrests, but it's fucking Portland. So I doubt anybody's going to be held accountable.
Yeah, and that's what drives me crazy is these are the same people who still to this day want to talk about January 6th and how terrible it
Mhm.
was that these people walked in a building when they have lit federal buildings on fire. They've gone into buildings, they've injured officers, they're throwing fireworks at cops, they're burning cop cars, and that's all okay. But January 6th was the worst thing that's ever happened in America, according to the left. Like, it's just
The
ridiculous.
insurrection.
Yeah. So speaking of like all this violence, we need to talk about the two Democrat lawmakers in Minnesota that were shot over the weekend in their homes along with their spouses. So this is just such a weird story, and I feel like there is so much shadiness going on. I don't even know what to believe. So one of the victims was Melissa Hartman, who is the Democratic Farmer Labor Caucus leader, and her husband, Mark. Both of them were killed by a gunman impersonating a police officer at their Brooklyn Park home. So Governor Tim Walz like put out a statement. He described it as, quote, a politically motivated assassination. And then within hours, the same attacker struck Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette in their Champlin home, and both were seriously wounded but survived. Hoffman had 6 gunshot wounds. Yvette had 5, but they're now in stable condition. And thankfully, Yvette shielded their child during the attack, who was there. And so Hoffman was also a Democratic farmer labor party state senator. And he also chaired the Human Services Committee. So authorities have named 57-year-old Vance Luther Bolter as the person of interest. And what's crazy is he dressed up wearing realistic police gear, including a latex mask, uniform, badge, vest, and he even rigged his vehicle to look like a police cruiser. So he went there acting like a cop and they, let him in. And when police officers arrived, he opened fire at them at Hortman's residence. But then he got away on foot, and there was like a statewide manhunt. There was a $50,000 FBI reward for information leading to his capture. But now I heard he is in police custody. And so in his vehicle, they found a manifesto and an extensive list of 70 names, including Minnesota Democrats, abortion rights advocates, and places of worship. And some of the names were like Governor Walz, Ilhan Omar, Tina Smith, Keith Ellison. And then there was also a flyer referencing the No Kings protest. So residents were urged to verify police credentials, not to answer the door if there's a lone officer. And then there was like a brief shelter in place that was enacted. And they had more protection for officials that were on this suspect list. So the protests for this whole No Kings movement in Minneapolis were canceled. So at least that's, one good thing that came from this. But Trump responded on Truth Social saying, quote, I have been briefed on the terrible shooting that took place in Minnesota, which appears to be a targeted attack against state lawmakers. Our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and the FBI are investigating the situation, and they will be prosecuting anyone involved to the fullest extent of the law. Such horrific violence will not be tolerated in the United States of America. God bless the great people of Minnesota, a truly great place. So here's where it starts getting messy because the left is, right off the bat saying like this was MAGA attacking Democrats and, violence and all these things. But then when you look into the shooter, he had close ties to Minnesota's Democrat establishment. He was a former political appointee to Tim Walz's workforce board. He served on the Workforce Development Board, which was an appointment from the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. He also worked security for the DFL in events in the past, and he was kind of considered a party insider, and an activist in like labor union circles. And then the report suggests that the manifesto said that he saw like corruption and betrayal and authoritarianism within that party. So it's kind of confusing. Like it sounds like the guy was just nuts. But the hit list wasn't random. Again, like it was Democrats, abortion advocates, and churches. So the other piece of the puzzle that's very odd is this happened right after something passed on June 9th. So they had a special legislative session to finalize the state budget, and lawmakers voted to repeal Minnesota care coverage for illegals. So the House passed with 68 to 65, and Melissa Hortman, the victim, and the DFL House leader, was the only Democrat in the House to cross party lines and vote with Republicans. And then in the Senate, there were a few Democrats that joined the GOP, including Senator Hoffman. And Democrats called that like painful or a wound on the soul of Minnesota. So these two lawmakers, both part of the DFL, voted against their party, and then a few days later they're shot by someone who was once a Democrat insider. And it seems like it could be a motive, but I don't know. Like you were the investigator. What do you think looking at this whole case?
Honestly, I'm totally fucking confused about what the real story is with this guy, or even where his party affiliations lie, because that's the part that's really not adding up. Was he a Democrat, a Republican? Was he neither? Apparently, like, yes, he did serve on Tim Walz's Workforce Development Board, and he did work security at these DFL events. But records show that he and his wife were registered Republicans in Oklahoma back in the early 2000s. But by 2019, he was declaring no party preference. And there are state filing documents in Minnesota that indicate he was identified as politically unaffiliated. But then you have his roommate, David Carlson, who told the press that Bolter voted for Trump and was a very strong Trump supporter. He said he's known Bolter since the fourth grade, and he was a really great guy who wasn't openly political. He was a Christian who strongly opposed abortion. He also said that he had financial and employment struggles, so he was doing odd security jobs and body recovery gigs. So he and his wife lived in Green Isle, which is, I guess, like an hour from Minneapolis. So he was renting a room from Carlson in the city a few days a week because he was working these irregular shifts in the city. And then Carlson said that Bolter sent him a text message on Saturday morning at 6 a.m. And it said, quote, "I love you guys. I've made some choices. I may be dead shortly. I don't want to say anything more and implicate you in any way. I love you guys, and I'm sorry for all the trouble this caused." So the thing that doesn't make sense to me is that if he was a Trump supporter or more aligned with Republican values, then why would he kill the two Democrats who sided with conservatives, or kill one and shoot the other, right? Who sided with conservatives? Like the female, she wasn't a radical leftist. If anything, she seemed to be a more common sense traditional Democrat because she sided with conservatives on other issues before related to law enforcement and also like fiscal issues more than once. So I was asking our GPT about it, and it gave me a very interesting theory and said that maybe he was working under the Democrat side as like an opportunist to try and target political enemies from the inside. But there's also this like very specific evangelical ideology in who he was targeting, because like you said, it wasn't just high profile Democrats. This list of 70 names included multiple abortion clinics, healthcare providers, and people who were active in pro women's health advocacy groups, all of which were tied to abortion rights. And this was not a typical manifesto. Everyone's calling it a manifesto, but it's really not. There's no personal rants. There's not a bunch of ideological rhetoric or crazy talk. It is just a list of names. It's kind of like a kill list more than anything. And this guy had a history of being a religious extremist. He's very anti-abortion, anti-LGBTQ. He was an ordained minister and affiliated with something called the Revo Formation Ministries back in 2010. And he was involved in like missions, sharing the gospel overseas with militant Islamists in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And then he claimed he worked in security services in conflict zones in Eastern Europe and Africa and the Middle East. And he gave some sermon in the Congo in 2023 where he was denouncing abortion and LGBTQ rights. And I guess he followed and praised like a lot of very conservative evangelical groups. So it seems like there's a very clear religious extremist element to these killings and that they weren't just political. And like maybe his history of working in security and doing this international military work with extremist groups exposed him to radicalized thinking. Maybe he just has this totally warped view of anti-government extremism, or maybe the guy just snapped and lost his shit because he was having financial issues and I guess his overseas security businesses were failing. But either way, like you said, he was caught and arrested last night, I think like 1 in the morning, early this morning, near his home in Green Isle because he was spotted on a trail camera and then the police found him in the woods and he easily surrendered. So I'm curious to see if he's going to give any explanation for why he did it or any, you know, insight into his crazy mind.
Well, yeah, I'll be curious to see what comes out of this. Are we going to hear anything? Because it's like the guy who attempted to assassinate Trump, he was in custody. We haven't heard anything on that. The guy in Butler was like cremated right away. They're obviously crazy people that were probably hired. Was this guy a crazy person that was hired? I don't know, but I don't think it's a coincidence that this guy who was politically appointed by the Democratic Farmer Labor Department and also did security for them ends up killing the DFL House leader and DFL senator, both of whom just voted against their party. Like clearly this guy was crazy, but crazy people like that would be the perfect person to like hire and take or, have them take the fall when they get caught. So like was it a hit job? Like you said, there's this kill list that was not really personal. It looked more like a kill list. But I just feel like think of the message this sends to other Democrats in Minnesota. Like this hidden message, like you better not vote against the party. Like look at what happened to them. But then in the public, it just looks like some crazy nut job. And then the media could run with this theory that he's, a right-wing extremist and the Democrats are the victims and it would help this whole movement of protesters, like so I don't really buy that he acted alone. I think that there's more to the story, and I think it'll be really telling what happens from here. Because if I had to bet money, I would guess we're not going to hear anything. Just like we didn't hear anything about the Trump assassinator.
Well, I think if he is like, if it is an inside job by the Democrats, he's probably going to die in jail
Right.
before we can even find out anything anyway.
Yeah. So we will see. Who knows? But it's definitely a weird, weird story, and anything could be possible. But while we've been distracted with like all of these things, the riots, the military parade, these murders, there's something else that was going on that is huge. 244 child predators were just arrested, including 21 registered sex offenders, and 109 children were saved in Texas during Operation Soteria Shield. So there were over 70 law enforcement agencies from the FBI to local PDs in Wiley, Plano, Garland, and a bunch more. And they all teamed up with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So they ended up seizing more than 1,100 devices and 213 terabytes of illicit content, which I guess was just completely heinous. And it's now in forensic reviews. So they think there's going to be a lot more arrests coming once they can go through all the footage. But of the 109 children rescued, many of them had never been reported missing. So just think about that for a second. They were completely off the grid. No one even knew they were gone. It's like kids slipping through the cracks of this broken system. And if I had to guess, I would say they are part of the 300,000 missing migrant children that were allowed to be human trafficked into this country by the Biden administration. Yet the mainstream media isn't talking about it because it brings up the ongoing question of where are the 300,000 missing migrant children? And like, why aren't any of these rioters and protesters standing up for them if they're so concerned about illegal immigrants? Well, what about the illegal 300,000 migrant children that are gone? And so they found 109. I hope that with all of this information, we're going to see more and hear more, and maybe they'll start to break up this human trafficking ring. But I think it's a big story that isn't getting enough coverage.
Yeah, this is crazy because it is literally one of the biggest online child exploitation stings in Texas history, and the mainstream media isn't covering it at all. Now, granted, the investigation was actually conducted back in April, so they're just starting to release the details now. And this was huge. Like it covered both the northern and eastern districts of Texas. And when you think about, like, I don't know anything about terabytes, but isn't like terabytes a shit ton of information? Like one
Yeah,
terabyte is huge, right?
right. That's
And
why they're
this is,
saying there's definitely going to be a lot more arrests because they've only scratched the surface at this point.
yeah,
So I'm
this is
sure
so
we'll have to
scary.
follow this. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely.
And hopefully not just arrests, but hopefully they find, more children with all that information that they have to go over. But I mean, they're going to need a huge team because, like you said, that's a huge amount of data to sift through. Um, and it's so sad, but I will never stop talking about these 300,000 missing children. It's just
Mhm.
like that is at the forefront, and people are aware of it too, because again, like what I was saying on TikTok, you have all of these influencers and celebrities that are publicly speaking out against ICE. And if you go to the comments, that is like the most frequent comment is like, what about the 300,000 missing children? Why aren't you concerned about them? So people are aware of it and people are not letting it go and wanting more information.
Yeah, you
So we'll
remember you
see.
had AOC crying about kids in cages a
Yeah.
few years ago, right? Well, what about kids that have just literally disappeared? Nobody on the Democrats side is crying about that.
No, they only cry about the criminal illegal immigrants. That's who they
Right.
care about, are the criminals. So yeah, we'll follow this story because I am very curious to see, if they can recover more and break up this human trafficking ring. We'll see what happens, but we'll keep everyone posted. So I hope you have a great week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday.